Hello Nigame fans! A huge thank you to all of those who voted in the most recent community poll on the Soulsborne series, with OG Dark Souls just edging out Bloodborne by a little bit, and in celebration of that, here's a look at the top 10 best indie games like Dark Souls that you can play right now. We begin with Morbid the Seven Acolytes, a late entry from 2020 that's all sorts of awesome, being an entry in the top-down action-adventure space, but with the Souls-like elements of stamina-based combat and that grim, dark aesthetic. You have to defeat the 7 Acolytes in order to save the world from a great darkness, with some compelling RPG and loot systems in this. Love the look, action, and overall vibe of this game, although the main complaint seems to be that it's not that difficult since you can simply run circles around enemies, but if you're sick of get good type gameplay loops but still want that grim dark gothic aesthetic, this is one to get. I mentioned in my last video on upcoming Metroidvania titles that I think sci-fi with fantasy elements is a neat mix, with Hellpoint being somewhat in that space, only swapping out dragons for eldritch horrors. Looking a little bit like Dead Space since it's set on board a derelict space station. Cosmic gods and their minions roam the halls, where you're sent on a mission to find out what caused a catastrophic event known as the Merge, where the gimmick here is that the space station orbits around a black hole in real time, which triggers various events and boss appearances, as well as changes to enemy behavior. While we got a mixed reception at launch due to bugs, things seem to be largely polished, so do give this another shot if you tried it and did not like it the first time around.
I've never understood that expression, death's embrace. And yet, here we are.
A title that I always bang on about is Death's Gambit, an underrated title from 2018 that was not too well received at launch, but has since gotten updates and patch that made it a whole lot better. You were slain in battle, but were resurrected by death itself, being bound to its service as you hunt down the Guardians of the Realm. 2D Souls-likes are tricky to get right, since the loss of a dimension makes moving and dodging much more difficult, but a gorgeous pixel art title which is not to be missed. You're still waiting on a massive content patch that promises to retool the entire game, but COVID unfortunately has pushed that back, so stay tuned and I'll let you know in the big content patch series.
Death is a matter of principle. Don't forget that in your endless war.
Hollow Knight needs no further introduction, being the definitive indie game of the last decade, and don't get me wrong, I love the title, but it isn't as pure of a Souls-like title, which is why it's at this spot. Regardless, there is a dark, moody atmosphere, challenging bosses and a corpse run mechanic, without stamina-based combat, which is the main knock. However, love it so much and always worth a replay, and you may even want to experiment with mods as well. I really love the look of Unworthy, a monochrome 2D Souls-like title that is again tremendously underrated, where interestingly, you cannot jump in this game. Monochrome is difficult to get right, but the various shades of grey used here gives the game a unique feel, with challenging bosses and a dark atmosphere being the highlights.
For as long as we could remember, this is how it has always been. Devotion is taught through suffering. Drawn to the divine light like moths, sinners will relentlessly advance.
Another awesome entry that has been overlooked is Dark Devotion, one with a little bit more of a religious overtone since you play as a Templar and have to put your devotion to the test by delving into a fallen temple on a cursed pilgrimage. Another gorgeous pixel art entry, the combat in this is suitably challenging, with even simple enemies having the possibility of killing you, so very Souls-like indeed. Love the boss designs in particular, but that's me as a fan of pixel art games, but if you have not checked this out, certainly one to get. One of my favorite entries from 2020 is Vigil: The Longest Night, a 2D Souls-like title from a Taiwanese developer that's pretty awesome. While the translation may lead to some confusion, the boss fights are challenging, the combat fun and designs horrifying, so everything that you would want in a Souls-like title. There is a skill tree with multiple weapon specialization options, allowing for some replayability, where you need to uncover the mystery of the eternal darkness of the Longest Night. It does remind me a little bit of The Vagrant, so check that out as well, but a wonderful title not to be missed. I was trying to figure out where to put Blasphemous on this list, since it's one of the most gory and dark titles that you can imagine, with some deliberate combat which does not need a stamina system, so it doesn't quite count as a Souls-like title, but it's one of the best indie games on the market. Instead of a more classic medieval Gothic inspiration, this draws from the Catholic faith and the horrors of the Spanish Inquisition, with motifs of blasphemy, penance, sins and self-flagellation being well translated into the vibe of this game. It's been getting steady content patches since launch, more on that very soon, but for how great it plays, a no-brainer for the list.
Por siempre os bendigo en la muerte.
This world has known war for centuries, but peace is finally preciously near. We set out on the ocean to secure that peace. Failing this mission would surely plunge us into darker days.
When you talk about 2D Souls-likes, top of the class has to be Salt and Sanctuary, a title which is perhaps showing its age, but is nonetheless one of the best. There's so much variety in character classes, hidden mechanics and secrets to explore, from different starting items to gods and religions that you can pledge yourself to, not to mention some horrible, challenging bosses which all fits in with the theme. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to this game 5 years after launch, so cannot wait to see what's next from this developer.
You seem different. Untouched by false truths. Will you pry these gifts from the unwilling? Or will you let them rot? Bring the glands back to me.
And the new number 1 is Mortal Shell, another 2020 entry that impressed right out of the gate. While it's vague in story as per most Dark Souls games, the unique hook here is that you are a shade-like creature that can possess and inhibit the bodies of fallen warriors, the so-called Mortal Shell so to speak, using their powers to defeat your enemies. Combat has a unique flow due to a hardening mechanic which interrupts enemy attacks and can be used at any time, and once again nails that grim dark atmosphere, although it does have a nice variety of biomes as well. For a team of 15 at the time to make something like this is very impressive, taking the number 1 spot. For a look at upcoming Souls-like titles, check out this video and I will see you after the jump.